At family dinner, they whispered about putting me away. Now they're begging me for a place to stay. They thought I was too old, too gentle, too easy to ignore. For decades, I held this family together, quietly stitching every ripped seam, keeping secrets, paying bills no one else could. Then one night at dinner, as laughter flickered around the table, I overheard whispers about sending me away, like I was nothing but a burden. That moment was the last straw, but I did not cry or shout. Instead, I smiled and listened, letting their words settle deep inside me. Fuel for a plan they would never see coming. My name is Martha Evans, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my dignity from the people who took it for granted. If you're just joining me, welcome. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single twist in this journey. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Mom, you don't need to cook for everyone tonight, Susan said, not looking up from her phone, as I pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. We can just order pizza. It's no trouble, dear. I arranged chicken breasts on the cutting board, my hands moving with practiced precision. Besides, Emily and Grace love my roast chicken. They're teenagers, Mom. They'll eat anything. I didn't respond. Susan had been saying things like this for months, dismissive little comments that chipped away at my contributions like water-eroding stone. She sat at my kitchen table, in my house, criticizing my efforts while I prepared dinner for her and her daughters. "Where's David?" I asked, seasoning the chicken. "Still at work. Linda's picking up Tom from soccer practice." Susan finally looked up. "They'll be late again." Of course they would. My eldest son and his wife treated my home like a hotel, coming and going as they pleased, expecting meals and laundry and childcare, without so much as a thank you. Not that I kept score. Well, maybe I did. Just a little. "Michael called," Susan continued. "He's not coming tonight. Some meeting. Another meeting, another program, another fresh start that would last exactly 3 weeks before he disappeared. Again, leaving me to wonder if my youngest son was alive or dead until he showed up needing money or a place to sleep off whatever he'd been using. "That's fine," I said, though disappointment settled in my chest like a stone. More for the rest of us. The front door slammed, and David's voice boomed through the house. "Ma, where are you?" "Kitchen," I called back, already reaching for another plate. David never came home hungry without expecting to be fed immediately. "Something smells good." He appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes, tie loosened around his neck. At 42, he carried himself like the man of the house, which I suppose he thought he was. "What's for dinner?" "Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans." "Perfect. Linda's starving." Traffic was murder coming back from the school. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a beer without asking. "Oh, and Tom needs new cleats. His coach says the ones he has are too small." I nodded, already calculating the cost in my head. Tom was a good kid, and I loved my grandson, but every expense seemed to fall to me these days. David made decent money at his sales job, but somehow there was never enough left over after his car payments and Linda's shopping trips. "I can pick some up tomorrow," I said. "Thanks, Ma. You're the best." The casual gratitude stung more than outright rudeness would have. At least rudeness acknowledged I existed. This offhand appreciation felt like something you'd give a waitress or a store clerk. Polite but meaningless. Linda breezed in with Tom, her arms full of shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford. "Martha, wonderful. I was hoping you'd be cooking tonight. I'm absolutely exhausted." Tom hugged me around the waist and my heart lifted. At 12, he still showed genuine affection without expecting anything in return. "Hi, Grandma. Mom said you might make your chocolate cookies. This weekend?" "Of course, sweetheart. Any special occasion?" "Just because," he said, grinning. Linda set her bags on my counter, pushing aside the mail I'd been sorting. "Tom, go wash up. Dinner's almost ready, right, Martha?" 20 minutes, I said, checking. The chicken. Perfect timing. I need to call Karen back about Saturday's fundraiser. Linda disappeared toward the living room, phone already pressed to her ear. Susan stood up, stretching. "I should get the girls. They're upstairs doing homework." "How are they doing in school?" I asked. "Fine. Emily's struggling with algebra. But Grace is pulling A's in everything." Susan paused at the kitchen doorway. "Actually, Mom, I've been meaning to ask. Could you help Emily with her math? You were always good with numbers." Another responsibility, another expectation. I nodded anyway. "That would be wonderful. I'll pay you, of course." "Don't be silly. She's my granddaughter. But your time is valuable too." Was it? Sometimes, I wondered. They all lived in my house, ate my food, used me as their personal bank and childcare service, but did they actually value me? Or just what I provided? By the time everyone gathered around my dining room table, the familiar weight of invisible exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders. I served the meal I'd spent 2 hours preparing, refilled drinks, fetched forgotten napkins, and listened to conversations that flowed around me like I wasn't there. "The Henderson account finally came through," David told Linda between bites. "Looks like we'll hit our sales target this quarter." "That's wonderful, honey. Maybe we can finally take that weekend trip to wine country." "Tom's team made the playoffs," Linda announced. "The championship game is next Saturday." "I can drive him," I offered. "Oh, you don't need to do that, Martha. David and I will both be there." Of course they would. When it mattered, when there was glory to be shared or photos to be taken, they showed up. But who drove Tom to practice twice a week? Who bought his equipment and washed his uniforms and helped with his homework when his parents were too busy? "Emily, how's school going?" David asked his niece. "Okay, I guess. Math is really hard." "Grandma's going to help you," Susan said. "She's much better at explaining things than I ever was." "Thanks, Grandma," Emily said quietly. At 15, she was becoming more aware of family dynamics, and I could see the discomfort in her expression when her mother volunteered my time. "Any time, sweetheart." Grace, 13 and fearless, looked directly at me. "Grandma, why don't you ever eat much at dinner? You make all this food, and then barely touch it." The table fell silent for a moment. I realized everyone was looking. At me, as if noticing for the first time that I picked at my meals while ensuring theirs were perfect. "I taste while I cook," I said lightly. "By the time we sit down, I'm not very hungry anymore." It was only half true. The other half was that watching my family take my efforts for granted had a way of killing my appetite. "Well, it's delicious, as always," David said, already reaching for seconds. "You spoil us, Ma." "Spoil them?" Yes, I supposed I did. But children who are spoiled don't appreciate what they have, do they? They expect it. They demand it. And eventually they resent the person who gave it to them for not giving more. After dinner, Linda helped clear the table. A rare gesture that should have felt like assistance, but somehow felt patronizing instead. "You really outdid yourself tonight, Martha," she said, loading my dishwasher with my dishes. I don't know how you do it at your age. At my age, 67 wasn't ancient, but Linda had a way of making it sound like I was 1 foot in the grave. Maybe that was intentional. It keeps me busy, I replied. Well, you certainly don't act your age. Most women your age would be slowing down by now. There it was again. My age. As if being 67 automatically made me fragile, irrelevant, ready to be put out to pasture. Later, after everyone had scattered to their rooms or their evening activities, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of tea, looking at the photographs on my refrigerator. Pictures of graduations I'd paid for, weddings I'd helped plan, grandchildren I'd raised when their parents couldn't or wouldn't. Janet's voice echoed in my memory from our conversation earlier that week. Martha, you give and give until there's nothing left of you. What happens when they decide you've given enough? I'd laughed it off then. But sitting in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my invisible labor, her words felt prophetic. What would happen when they decided I'd given enough? When my age became inconvenience instead of just an observation? When my contributions were no longer valued because I was no longer seen as capable of making them? The house settled around me, creaking with the weight of decades and secrets. My house, my mortgage payments for 25 years, my name on the deed, my furniture, my memories, my life. But somehow, somewhere along the way, I'd become a guest in my own home. This is lovely, Mom, Susan said, surveying the dining room, table I'd spent an hour setting. You really went all out. I had. Good china, cloth napkins, fresh flowers from my garden, candles flickering in the crystal holders that had been my mother's. It was David's birthday, his 43rd, and I'd wanted to make it special. It's not every day my firstborn turns 43, I said, carrying in the roast beef I'd started preparing at dawn. God, 43, David groaned, accepting the plate I handed him. When did I get so old? You're not old, Linda said, squeezing his shoulder. You're distinguished. Distinguished, he laughed. That's what we call old now. Tom rolled his eyes in the way only 12-year-olds can. Dad, you're not old. Grandma's old. The words hit like a slap, even though I knew he didn't mean them cruelly. Children speak truth without filters. And in Tom's world, 67 was old. Ancient, probably. Thanks a lot, kiddo, I said with a forced smile. I didn't mean it like that, Grandma. You're just older. Much older, Susan added with a laugh. Mom's got 24 years on you, David. That's a whole person's worth of years. Susan, I said quietly. What? It's true. You were, 24 when David was born? That's older than Emily is now. Emily looked up from her mashed potatoes, suddenly interested. Wait, Grandma was my age when she had Uncle David. Younger, actually, Susan continued, warming to her topic. Mom was barely 23. Can you imagine, having a baby at your age? Susan, please, I said more firmly. I'm just saying. It puts things in perspective. Mom's been a mother for literally half her life. More than half, David corrected, cutting into his roast beef. She's been mothering all of us for decades. There was something in his tone. Not quite resentment, but close to it. As if my years of caring for him were somehow an imposition on his adulthood. Well, you can't mother us forever, Linda said lightly, refilling her wine glass. At some point, we all have to grow up and take care of ourselves. The conversation felt like it was heading somewhere I didn't want to go. I stood up to check on the vegetables in the kitchen, but I could still hear them talking. Speaking of taking care, David's voice carried clearly. Have you noticed Mom seems more, I don't know, forgetful lately? My hand froze on the oven door. Forgetful? What do you mean? Susan asked. Little things. She asked me twice last week if I'd paid her back for Tom's cleats. And yesterday she couldn't remember if she'd taken her blood pressure medication. I had asked twice about the cleats because he hadn't answered the first time. And I'd been uncertain about my medication because Linda had been talking to me while I was taking it, distracting me from my routine. She is getting older, Linda said, her voice dropping but not enough. It's natural for people her age to start having memory issues. She's not that old, Grace said defensively. I felt a rush of gratitude for my granddaughter. 67 isn't young, sweetheart, Susan replied. And Mom's been under a lot of stress lately. What stress? Emily asked. Well, taking care of all of us, for one thing. This house is a lot of work, and we're not exactly easy house guests. House guests? As if they were temporary visitors instead of permanent residents who'd been living off my generosity for months. I returned to the dining room with the green beans, setting the serving bowl down perhaps a little too firmly. Everything all right, Ma? David asked. Perfect, I said, taking my seat. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Tom's soccer playoffs, Emily's upcoming school dance, Grace's science project. But the earlier words hung in the air like smoke. I pushed food around my plate, my appetite gone, after we'd sung, Happy Birthday! And cut the chocolate cake I'd made from scratch. Linda excused herself to make a phone call. David followed her to the kitchen, and I found myself alone with Susan and the kids. Mom, can I ask you something? Susan's voice was gentle, but there was something underneath it that made me wary. Of course. Are you happy? Happy? I repeated, confused by the question. I mean, with how things are. With all of us living here depending on you so much. You never complain, but... But what? But you seem tired lately. More than usual. Emily and Grace were listening now, pretending to be absorbed in their phones but clearly tuned into our conversation. I'm fine, Susan. Just the usual aches and pains of getting older. That's just it, though. You are getting older, and we're all still here, taking advantage of your generosity. Taking advantage? At least she was honest about it. You're not taking advantage. You're my family. But for how long, Mom? How long can this arrangement really work? Before I could answer, David and Linda returned to the dining room. There was something different about their expressions, a shared look that made my stomach clench. Ma, David said, sitting back down. Linda and I were just talking in the kitchen. About what? About you. About all of us, really. Linda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We're concerned, Martha, about how much you're taking on. I'm not taking on anything I can't handle. But you shouldn't have to handle all of it, David said. You've done enough. More than enough. What are you saying? Susan leaned forward. We're saying maybe it's time to think about your future. Really think about it. My future? Mom, you're 67 years old, Susan said gently. You've spent your entire adult life taking care of other people. Don't you think you deserve to take care of yourself, for a change? I do take care of myself. Do you? Linda asked. When was the last time you did something just for you? When was the last time you didn't have to worry about cooking for 6 people, or doing everyone's laundry or driving Tom to practice? I like doing those things. But you shouldn't have to. David said. Not at your age. There it was again, my age. The number that apparently defined everything I could or couldn't do, should or shouldn't want. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew. David and Linda exchanged another look. Susan fidgeted with her napkin. There are some really nice places, Linda said carefully. Senior communities, where you could have your own space but not have to worry about maintenance or cooking big meals every night. You want to put me in a nursing home. Not a nursing home, David said quickly. A senior living community. They have activities, social programs, people your own age to spend time with. People my own age, I repeated. Mom, you'd love it, Susan added. No more worrying about bills or yard work or taking care of everyone else. You could focus on yourself for once. And what happens to this house? Another look passed between David and Linda. Well, it is pretty big for one person, David said. But I'm not one person. There are 6 of us living here. That's the point, Ma. You shouldn't have to support all of us anymore. The room fell silent. Emily and Grace were staring at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. Tom had disappeared, probably to his room to play video games. I see, I said finally. Mom, we're not trying to push you out, Susan said. We just want what's best for you. What's best for me, I repeated. How thoughtful. Martha, please don't be upset, Linda said. We're just thinking ahead, planning for the future. Whose future? Everyone's, David said, including yours. You deserve to enjoy your golden years without all this responsibility. My golden years. Another euphemism for old and irrelevant. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting after sitting too long. Well, this has been a lovely birthday. Dinner. I think I'll go clean up the kitchen. Mom, we can help, Susan started. No need. I'm used to doing it myself. I gathered plates with hands that trembled slightly. Not from age, but from anger and hurt, and the dawning realization that my worst fears were coming true. They didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as a burden to be managed, a problem to be solved. In the kitchen, I loaded the dishwasher and scrubbed pans with more force than necessary. Behind me, I could hear them talking in low voices, probably planning the next phase of their intervention. Through the window above the sink, I could see my neighbor Janet's house. The lights were on in her living room, and I could make out her silhouette, reading in her favorite chair. Janet, who was 72, and lived independently, and still traveled and volunteered at the library, and had opinions about politics and books and life. Janet, who had warned me this day, would come. I dried my hands on the dish towel and looked around my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd comforted crying children and celebrated achievements and held this family together through every crisis. My kitchen, in my house, that they wanted to take away from me so they could have what's best for me. The anger was still there, burning steady and bright. But underneath it, something else was growing, something that felt like resolve. Martha, you look tired, Janet said, handing me a cup of coffee across her kitchen table. When's the last time you got a full night's sleep? I sleep fine, I lied, stirring cream into my cup. The truth was, I'd been lying awake for hours each night since David's birthday dinner, replaying every word, every look, every casual dismissal of my worth. Janet settled into her chair, studying me with the sharp eyes that came from 40 years of friendship. And I'm Queen Elizabeth. What's really going on? I sipped my coffee, buying time. Janet had always been able to see through my carefully constructed facades, even when we were young mothers comparing notes about teething and potty training. "They want to put me in a senior living facility," I said finally. Janet's coffee cup clinked against her saucer. "Come again?" "David and Susan and Linda. They think I'd be happier in a place with people my own age, where I don't have to worry about taking care of everyone else." "Those ungrateful—" Janet caught herself, shaking her head. "Sorry, go on." "They say they're concerned about me, about how much I'm taking on." "Taking on? You mean like paying their bills and feeding their children and providing them with free housing?" I nodded, feeling tears threaten. "They made it sound like I'm some frail old woman who can't handle her own life anymore." "You're 67, not 97, and you're sharper than people half your age." Janet leaned forward. "What did you say to them?" "Nothing, really." I was too shocked. "Well, you need to say something now, before they start looking at brochures behind your back." The thought chilled me. Were they already researching facilities? Already planning my exile? "Janet, what if they're right? What if I am getting too old to handle everything?" "Martha Evans, stop that right now." Janet's voice was fierce. "You raised 3 children as a single mother after your husband died. You worked 2 jobs to put them through college. You've been holding that family together for 40 years, and now they want to toss you aside because it's convenient for them?" The memories came flooding back, images I'd tried to bury under years of quiet resentment. David, at 18, accepted to State University but unable to afford the tuition. I'd sold my engagement ring, the one piece of jewelry I'd planned to pass down to Susan to cover his first semester. He never knew. I told him I'd found the money in savings. Susan, at 25, divorced and desperate, showing up at my door with 2-year-old Emily and 6-month-old Grace. She'd stayed for 3 years while she finished her nursing degree. I'd worked nights at the hospital cafeteria to pay for daycare, and formula and diapers, coming home exhausted to help her study for exams. Michael, at 16, arrested for possession. The lawyer cost $5,000, money I'd been saving for a new roof. It rained in my bedroom for 2 years after that, but Michael stayed out of juvenile detention. "I gave them everything," I whispered. "Yes, you did. And they took it all without question. I wanted to give it. They're my children." "Of course you did. That's what mothers do. But what have they given you in return?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. David had given me a grandson and a daughter-in-law who treated my home like a hotel. Susan had given me 2 granddaughters and constant criticism disguised as concern. Michael had given me sleepless nights and empty promises. "They've given me a family," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "Have they? Or have they given you a lifetime of obligations?" The question hung between us like smoke. I remembered David's graduation from college. How proud I'd been watching him walk across that stage. He'd thanked his professors in his speech, his classmates, his girlfriend. He hadn't mentioned the mother who'd sold her most precious possession to make it possible. I remembered Susan's wedding to her first husband. How beautiful she'd looked in the dress I'd saved for months to buy. She'd thanked everyone at the reception. Her friends, her co-workers, her new in-laws. She'd forgotten to thank the mother who'd raised her daughter while she planned the perfect wedding. I remembered every Christmas morning, watching my grandchildren open presents I'd bought with money I didn't have, seeing their faces light up with joy. Joy they assumed came from their parents, who took credit for the generosity that was quietly mine. "I was 23 when I had David," I said slowly. 23 years old, and I thought I knew everything about love and sacrifice. You were just a baby yourself. I gave up college. Did you know that? I was going to be a teacher. I had a scholarship to the state university, but then I got pregnant and Robert said we should get married right away. That I didn't need college if I was going to be a wife and mother. Janet's face softened. You never told me that. I never told anyone. It seemed selfish to regret it after Robert died. The children needed me to be strong, not bitter about dreams I'd given up. But you were bitter. Sometimes. Late at night, when they were all asleep and I was paying bills or mending clothes or planning the next day's meals, I'd think about what my life might have been like if I'd chosen differently. And now they want you to choose again. Except this time, they're choosing for you. The anger flared again, hot and clean. They think I'm too old to make my own decisions. Are you? No. The word came out stronger than I'd intended. No, I'm not. Then don't let them make this decision for you. I looked around Janet's kitchen, so similar to mine, but somehow lighter, brighter. Janet had raised 2 children on her own after her husband left, but she'd never let them move back home as adults. She'd never become their personal bank or babysitter, or cook. How did you do it? I asked. How did you keep them from taking advantage of you? Boundaries, Janet said simply. I loved my kids, but I loved myself too. When Tommy tried to move back home after his divorce, I said no. When Sarah wanted me to babysit her kids every weekend, I said no. They didn't like it at first, but eventually, they respected it. I don't know how to say no to them. You better learn, because if you don't, they'll keep taking until there's nothing left of you. I thought about the conversation at dinner, the casual way they'd discussed my future as if I weren't sitting right there. The way they'd talked about my age like it was a disease. My kindness like it was weakness. They think I need to be managed, I said. Then show them you don't. How? Janet smiled, and there was something almost predatory in it. You start by remembering that you hold all the cards, Martha. That house they're living in, yours. The money they're spending, yours. The stability they're taking for granted, all yours. She was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that I wasn't just the family caretaker, I was the family foundation. Without me, their comfortable little world would crumble. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you remind them who they're dealing with. You're not some helpless old woman who needs to be tucked away somewhere safe. You're Martha Evans, and you've been running this family longer than they've been adults. For the first time in days, I felt something other than hurt and anger. I felt power. I need to think about this, I said. Don't think too long. The longer you wait, the easier it becomes for them to make plans without consulting you. I finished my coffee and gathered my purse, my mind already racing with possibilities. Janet? Yes. Thank you for listening. For being honest. That's what friends are for. Real friends, anyway. Not the kind who smile to your face while planning to ship you off to Shady Pines. I laughed despite myself. It's probably not called Shady Pines. Doesn't matter what it's called. It's not where you belong. As I walked home across our adjoining backyards, I could see my family through the windows of my house. David on the couch, feet up watching television. Linda in the kitchen, probably making herself a snack without cleaning up afterward. Susan, at the dining room table helping Emily with homework. Homework I was supposed to help with, according to their casual assumption that my time belonged to them. My house, my family, my choice. It was time to remind them of that. Harold, thank you for seeing me on such short notice, I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. My old friend looked exactly the same as he had 20 years ago, when he'd helped me with Robert's estate. A little grayer, a little rounder, but still sharp as a tack. "Martha, it's always a pleasure. Though I have to say, you sounded upset on the phone. I need to review my will, and I want to understand exactly what rights I have regarding my property." Harold leaned back, his expression growing serious. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The dinner conversation, the casual dismissal of my capabilities, the suggestion that I'd be happier somewhere else. Harold listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. "They actually suggested you move to a senior living facility?" he asked when I finished. "They made it sound like they were doing me a favor." "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. I was too shocked to respond properly." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "Well, let's start with the basics. The house is in your name solely." "Yes. Has been since Robert died." "Good. Any joint accounts with your children?" "I added David to my checking account a few years ago, in case something happened to me. But it's still primarily my account." Harold frowned. "Martha, that was a mistake. Joint account holders have equal access to all funds." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means David can withdraw money without your permission. He has the same legal rights to that account as you do." I thought about the mysterious charges on my statements, the way David always seemed to have cash when he claimed to be broke. "Can I remove him?" "Absolutely. We'll handle that immediately. What about your other assets? Savings, investments, retirement accounts?" "All in my name only, thank God." "Smart woman. Now, about your will. When was it last updated?" "When you helped me with it originally, after Robert died." "That was 20 years ago, Martha. Circumstances change. People change. It might be time to reconsider your beneficiaries." The suggestion sent a chill through me. "You think I should disinherit my children?" "I think you should consider what they've earned versus what they've expected. There's a difference between providing for your children and enabling them to take advantage of you." I stared out his office window at the busy street below, watching people go about their lives. Normal people with normal families who probably didn't plot to ship their mothers off to institutional care. "Harold, what would happen if I became incapacitated? Who would make decisions for me?" "Do you have a power of attorney?" "David. I named him years ago." Harold's frown deepened. "Martha, given what you've told me, I'd strongly recommend changing that. Power of attorney is an enormous responsibility. It should go to someone who has your best interests at heart, not their own." "But he's my eldest son." "And from what you've described, he's already planning your future without consulting you. Do you really want to give him legal authority to make binding decisions on your behalf?" The thought terrified me. David with power of attorney could sign documents, access accounts, make medical decisions. He could authorize the very thing they'd suggested, moving me to a facility against my wishes. "Who else could I name?" "Anyone you trust. A friend, a relative, even a professional fiduciary. The important thing is choosing someone who will honor your wishes, not their own. Convenience." "Janet," I said immediately. "My neighbor Janet Miller. She's 72, but she's sharp as a whip." "Good choice. I'll draft new documents for both power of attorney and health care directives. We should also discuss your estate planning in more detail." Over the next hour, Harold walked me through options I'd never considered. Living trusts, charitable bequests, conditional inheritances. He explained how I could maintain control of my assets while protecting them from family members who might not have my best interests at heart. "There's something else you should consider," Harold said as our meeting wound down. "Documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Keep records of everything. Every conversation about your living situation, every financial contribution you make to your family, every instance where they dismiss your capabilities or autonomy. If this situation escalates, you'll want evidence of their behavior." "You think it will escalate?" "I think people who are comfortable taking advantage of someone's generosity don't usually stop when asked politely. They escalate when they feel their access to those benefits is threatened." Harold's words echoed in my mind as I drove home. I thought about David's casual assumption that he could make decisions about my future, Linda's dismissive comments, about my age, Susan's patronizing concern for my happiness. None of them had asked what I wanted. They'd simply decided what was best for me and expected me to be grateful for their concern. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house I'd called home for 30 years, the house where I'd raised my children, nursed my husband through his final illness, created a lifetime of memories, the house they wanted to take away from me. Through the front window, I could see David in what used to be Robert's chair, feet up on my coffee table, remote control in hand, making himself comfortable in my living room while planning my eviction. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. "Mom, can you pick up Grace from soccer practice at 6? I'm stuck at work." Another favor. Another assumption that my time was endlessly available for their convenience. I typed back, "Sorry, I have plans tonight." It was a small lie, but it felt revolutionary. I did have plans. Plans to take control of my own life. Susan's response came immediately. "Plans? What plans?" I smiled and turned off my phone without answering. Let her wonder. Let her figure out how to manage her own responsibilities for once. Inside the house, I went straight to my bedroom and pulled out the box I kept under my bed. Important papers, financial documents, the deeds and titles that proved what belonged to me. I spread everything out on my bed and began making lists. Assets, house worth approximately $400, savings account with $45,000, retirement fund with $180,000, life insurance policy worth $100,000, car paid in full, debts none. The house was paid off 3 years ago with Robert's life insurance, and my careful budgeting. Monthly income, Social Security and pension totaling $3,200, more than enough to live comfortably on my own. Monthly expenses for the household, groceries for 6 people, $800, utilities, $400, property taxes and insurance, $350, gas, maintenance, and miscellaneous expenses for everyone else's needs. Easily another $600. I was spending over $2,000 a month supporting my adult children and their families, money that could have been mine to use as I pleased. A soft knock on my bedroom door interrupted my calculations. "Mom?" Susan's voice. "Can I come in?" I quickly gathered the papers. "Just a minute." By the time I opened the door, everything was back in the box and shoved under the bed. "What's going on?" Susan asked, looking around suspiciously. "You seemed upset earlier." "I'm fine, just organizing some old papers." "Mom, about Grace's practice. I really am stuck at work. Could you possibly? I told you I have plans." Susan's eyebrows rose. "What kind of plans?" "Personal plans? With who?" The interrogation irritated me. When had I become accountable to my daughter for how I spent my time? Does it matter? Well, no, but You never go anywhere at night. I was just curious. Maybe it's time I started going places. Susan studied my face, clearly, puzzled by my uncharacteristic resistance. Are you sure you're okay? You've been acting strange since David's birthday. Strange, because I'd finally stopped being a doormat. I'm perfectly fine, Susan. I'm just tired of everyone assuming I have nothing better to do than solve their problems. Mom, that's not fair. We don't assume... Don't you? When was the last time anyone in this family asked if I minded doing a favor instead of simply expecting it? Susan opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She couldn't think of an example, and we both knew it. I'll figure something else out for Grace, she said quietly. Good. That's what responsible parents do. After Susan left, I felt both guilty and liberated. Guilty for being sharp with her, liberated for finally speaking my mind. My phone rang. Janet. How did it go with Harold? She asked without preamble. Eye-opening. Did you know that having someone as a joint account holder gives them equal access to all the money? Oh, Martha. Tell me you didn't. David's been on my checking account for 3 years. Harold said he can withdraw money without my permission. Janet swore colorfully. That explains a few things, doesn't it? It did. The mysterious charges, the way David always seemed to have spending money despite claiming to be broke, the casual attitude toward my finances. I'm removing him tomorrow, I said, and changing my will and my power of attorney. Good girl. What else? I'm starting to document everything. Every conversation, every assumption, every time they treat me like I'm incompetent. Smart. What about tonight? Do you really have plans? I looked out my bedroom window toward Janet's house. Would you like some company for dinner? I thought you'd never ask. Come over around 6. I'm making pot roast. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to dinner. I'll miss you, dear, Janet said, hugging me at her front door. A week at the cottage will do you good. I hope so, I replied, loud enough for Linda to hear from where she was obviously eavesdropping in my driveway. I need some time to think about my future. Janet squeezed my hand meaningfully. Take all the time you need. The cottage is yours for as long as you want it. It was Thursday morning, and I was loading my suitcase into Janet's car for our supposed trip to her family's cottage 2 hours north. In reality, I'd be staying in Janet's guest room while she maintained the fiction that I was out of town. Drive. Carefully, Linda called from my front porch, where she'd appeared the moment she heard car doors slamming. Martha, are you sure you have everything you need? I'm fine, Linda. It's just a week. Well, don't worry about anything here. We'll take care of everything. I was counting on it. The night before, I'd had individual conversations with each family member, carefully planting seeds of my departure. Susan, I need to get away for a few days. I'd told my daughter. Clear my head. Think about some things. What things? She'd asked, immediately suspicious. My future. Our conversation the other night got me thinking. Susan had looked relieved. Oh, Mom, that's wonderful. Maybe some time away will help you see that we're just trying to look out for you. Maybe it will. With David, I'd been more direct. I'm going to Janet's cottage for a week. You'll need to handle things here while I'm gone. Handle what things? Groceries, meals, Tom's practice schedule, Emily's tutoring sessions. The usual. David had frowned. Can't Linda do all that? Linda has her own responsibilities. You're adults. You'll figure it out. I'd also made some strategic phone calls to the bank. removing David from my checking account and opening a new one in my name only, to my pension administrator, changing my direct deposit information, to the utilities, informing them I'd be reviewing all services and might be making changes to the accounts. The hardest part had been restricting access to what remained in the joint account, just enough to cover immediate household expenses, but not enough for any surprises. Now, watching my family wave goodbye from the front porch, I felt like a general positioning troops for battle. Janet drove around the block and parked behind her house, where my car wouldn't be visible from my own home. "Phase 1 complete," she said with satisfaction. "How long do you think it'll take?" "David will try to access the account by tomorrow, when he realizes there's no dinner planned. When that fails, he'll probably call me." "And what will you tell him?" "That I'm having a lovely, peaceful time, and will be home when I'm ready." We settled in to wait. The first sign of trouble came Friday evening. Through Janet's living room window, we could see lights on in every room of my house and several pizza delivery boxes on the front porch. "They're ordering takeout," Janet observed with amusement. "For the third night in a row, I'd guess." Saturday morning brought more drama. Linda emerged from my house at 7 a.m. in workout clothes, clearly frustrated. She tried to start my car, which I'd moved to Janet's garage the night before, then stood in the driveway looking confused. My cell phone rang. "Mom, where's your car?" David's voice was strained. "With me, of course, at the cottage." "But Linda needs to take Tom to his game. Then Linda should use her own car." "Her car's in the shop, remember?" I didn't remember, because it was probably a lie. Linda's car was sitting in my driveway, as it had been all week. "I'm sure you'll work something out," I said cheerfully. "How are things going there?" "Fine. Everything's fine." But his tone suggested otherwise. Sunday brought the first real crisis. Janet and I were drinking coffee on her back porch when we heard shouting from my house. "Where is it?" David's voice carried clearly across the yard. "I don't know," Susan shouted back. Janet raised an eyebrow. "Think they've discovered the account situation?" "Probably. I wonder what they needed money for." We found out soon enough. My phone rang continuously for the next hour. David, then Linda, then Susan, then David again. I let them all go to voicemail. Finally, I listened to the messages. David: "Ma, there's a problem with the bank account. They're saying it's been closed. Call me back immediately." Linda: "Martha, honey, we really need to reach you. There's been some kind of mix-up with your banking. Can you call us as soon as you get this?" Susan: "Mom, please call. And David's having some kind of emergency with money, and we can't figure out what's wrong with your account." David again: "Ma, this isn't funny anymore. Tom needs new equipment for playoffs, and Emily has that school trip payment due Monday. Call me back now." The desperation in his voice was almost satisfying. I called him back Monday evening, after letting them stew for another full day. "Ma, thank God. Where have you been?" "At the cottage, like I told you. Having a wonderful, peaceful time. We've been trying to reach you for days. There's something wrong with your bank account." "Wrong? What do you mean?" "I went to withdraw money for Tom's equipment and they said the account was closed." "Oh, that. I restructured my banking while I was away. Harold recommended it, for security purposes." "Harold? Harold Thompson. Why were you talking to your lawyer?" "Estate planning, mostly. Making sure everything's in order." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Ma, we need to talk. When are you coming home?" "I'm not sure yet. I'm enjoying the peace and quiet." But Tom's playoffs? David, you're a grown man with a job and a wife. Surely you can handle your son's equipment needs without depending on your elderly mother's bank account. I'd never called myself elderly before, but the word had the desired effect. That's not... Ma, we don't depend on you. Don't you? Another long silence. How much longer are you planning to stay away? As long as it takes. As long as what takes? For me to decide what I want my future to look like? I hung up before he could respond. Through Janet's window, I could see my house. The lights were on in the kitchen, and I could make out figures moving around, probably trying to figure out how to cook an actual meal instead of ordering pizza again. Having second thoughts? Janet asked, joining me at the window. No, I said, surprised by my own certainty. For the first time in years, I'm not thinking about anyone else's needs. It feels liberating. Good. Because the hard part's just beginning. She was right. This week had been about disrupting their routines and forcing them to confront their dependence on me. The real work would come when I returned home and laid down new rules for how our family would function. But first, they needed to fully understand what life looked like without me propping them up. From the frantic phone calls and the chaos, I could observe from Janet's window. That lesson was proceeding exactly as planned. Martha, thank goodness you're back, Linda said, rushing out to meet me as I pulled into my driveway. Wednesday evening. We've missed you so much. The house behind her looked like a disaster zone. Garbage bags piled by the front door, newspapers scattered on the porch, my flower boxes dead from neglect. How was your trip? Linda continued, hovering as I gathered my suitcase from the trunk. You look rested. I did feel rested, actually. A week of sleeping in without worrying about breakfast for 6 people, of reading books without interruption, of having adult conversations about topics other than grocery, lists and carpools. It was exactly what I needed, I said. Inside, the house was worse than it had appeared from the street. Dishes stacked in the sink, laundry overflowing from baskets, dust accumulating on surfaces I'd kept spotless for 30 years. We've been so busy, Linda said, following my gaze around the kitchen. Work and the kids' activities and everything. We were planning to clean up before you got back. Were you? David appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking haggard. Ma, we need to talk. Hello to you too, David. About the bank account. Can I at least put my suitcase down first? He stepped aside reluctantly as I walked past him toward my bedroom. The hallway carpet was littered with Tom's soccer equipment and Grace's school papers. My bathroom was a disaster. Towels on the floor, toothpaste smeared on the mirror, someone else's dirty clothes in my hamper. I set my suitcase on my bed and took a deep breath. This had been my sanctuary, the one space in the house that was entirely mine. Now it felt violated. Ma? David's voice from the doorway. Can we talk now? I turned to face him, my son who looked like a stranger in that moment. What would you like to discuss? The money situation. We tried to pay Tom's playoff fees and you discovered that you no longer have access to my bank account. Yes, I assumed that would happen. But why? I thought we agreed I should be on the account in case of emergencies. We did agree to that. 3 years ago, when I was concerned about what would happen if I became incapacitated. But you've been using it as your personal piggy bank ever since. David's face reddened. That's not true, isn't it? Would you like me to show you the statements? The ATM withdrawals you never mentioned? The online purchases you made without asking? Those were emergencies. A new golf bag is an emergency? Ma, You're being unreasonable. Am I? Let me ask you something, David. How much of your own money did you spend while I was gone? He shifted uncomfortably. We had unexpected expenses. How much? I don't see how that's relevant. It's relevant because this is my house, and you're living here rent-free, and I'd like to know what it's costing me to support your family. The words hung in the air between us. Linda appeared behind David, her face tight with anxiety. Martha, we don't expect you to support us, she said. We contribute. Do you? Let's see. David, what did you pay toward household expenses last month? I bought groceries a few times. How much? I don't know exactly. I do. $63. Over the entire month. For a family of 6 people eating 3 meals a day in this house. Linda stepped forward. We had Tom's orthodontist bills, which I paid, and the car repair, which I also paid. Martha, you offered to help with those things. I offered to help, not to pay for everything while you both work full-time jobs and act like money grows on trees. Susan appeared in the hallway, drawn by the raised voices. What's going on? Your mother has decided to cut off our access to her bank account, David said bitterly. It was never our access, I corrected. It was my account that I allowed you to use in emergencies, but apparently, everything is an emergency in your world. Mom, you can't just strand us without warning, Susan said. Emily's school trip payment is due tomorrow. Then pay it. With what money? With your money, Susan. The money you earn at your job. But I don't have... Then maybe Emily can't go on the school trip. The shocked silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. They'd become so accustomed to me solving every financial problem that they'd stopped taking responsibility for their own obligations. Ma, you're being cruel, David said. Am I? Or am I being realistic? You're all adults with jobs and responsibilities. It's time you started acting like it. Linda stepped closer, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. Martha, honey, we understand you're upset about something. Why don't you tell us what's really bothering you? What's bothering me is being treated like a walking ATM instead of a human being. That's not how we treat you, isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked how I was feeling, instead of asking for money or favors? Another silence. When was the last time anyone thanked me for cooking dinner every night? More silence. When was the last time anyone considered whether I might have plans before volunteering my time to solve your problems? Mom, Susan said quietly, we didn't realize. No, you didn't, because it never occurred to you to think about anyone but yourselves. I walked past them into the kitchen, surveying the damage. My good pans burned and unwashed, my clean counters sticky with spills, my organized cabinets ransacked and left in chaos. This is what happens when I'm gone for 1 week, I said. 1 week, and you can't maintain even basic cleanliness in a house that doesn't belong to you. We were planning to clean, Linda started. When? After I came back to do it for you? David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he'd been caught doing something wrong. Ma, what do you want from us? I want respect. I want consideration. I want to be treated like a person instead of a convenience. Of course, we respect you. Do you? Because last week, you all discussed my future like I wasn't sitting at the table. You made plans to ship me off to a senior facility without bothering to ask what I wanted. We were trying to help. You were trying to get rid of me so you could have this house to yourselves. The accusation hit its mark. David and Linda exchanged a guilty look that confirmed my suspicions. "That's not true," Susan said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Well, here's some news for all of you. This house belongs to me. The mortgage is paid off, the deed is in my name, and I can do whatever I want with it, including ask people to leave if they can't show basic respect for the person providing them with free housing." The threat was implicit but clear. For the first time since I'd returned, they were really listening. "What do you want us to do?" David asked finally. "I want you to start acting like the adults you claim to be. Pay your own bills, clean up after yourselves, and stop assuming that I exist solely to make your lives easier. And if we do that, then we can discuss new arrangements for living in this house. Arrangements that involve rent, shared responsibilities, and basic courtesy." "Rent?" Linda's voice was sharp. "You want us to pay rent?" "Adults pay rent, Linda, even when they're living with family." "But this is David's childhood home," Linda said, backing toward the door. "I just wanted to ask if you'd seen my grandmother's ring anywhere. I seem to have misplaced it." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed it myself, except Harold had just shown me the online listing where Linda had sold my grandmother's ring 3 weeks ago. "I haven't seen it," I said, meeting her eyes steadily. "Have you checked carefully? Sometimes things turn up in unexpected places." "Yes, I've looked everywhere. It's probably just misplaced." Linda fled the kitchen, and I heard her feet on the stairs, probably going to warn David about my meeting with Harold. "She knows," Harold said quietly. "Yes. The question is, what am I going to do about it? What do you want to do?" I thought about my mother's china, the set she'd saved for special occasions that had been sold to strangers for Linda's spending. Money. I thought about David's casual theft, Susan's manipulative use of my credit card, all of them conspiring to drain my resources while planning to ship me off to a facility. "I want them to face consequences," I said finally. "Real consequences." Harold nodded. "Then we need to document everything properly and decide how you want to proceed. Criminal charges, civil restitution, or simply using this information as leverage to protect yourself going forward." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Martha, you need to understand. This behavior won't stop just because you've asked nicely. People who are comfortable stealing from family members escalate. When they feel threatened, as if to prove Harold's point, I heard raised voices from upstairs. David and Linda arguing in urgent whispers. Whatever Linda had told him about my meeting with Harold had clearly alarmed them. "I should go," Harold said, gathering his briefcase. "But Martha, promise me you'll be careful, and call me immediately if you feel unsafe or pressured in any way." After Harold left, I sat alone in my kitchen staring at the spot where my mother's candlesticks had stood for 30 years. Items Linda had handled every holiday, complimenting their beauty while secretly planning to sell them. The theft of my money hurt, but the theft of my memories, of the tangible connections to my parents and my past, felt like a violation of something sacred. My phone buzzed, a text from Michael. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" I texted back. "Janet's house, 20 minutes. Whatever my youngest son wanted to discuss, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you," Michael said, pacing nervously in Janet's living room. "Something about David and Linda." Janet handed him a cup of coffee, her expression encouraging. She'd agreed to host this conversation after I'd explained about Harold's revelations and my need for a neutral space to talk with Michael. "What is it, son?" Michael stopped pacing and turned to face me. "I know about the money, about what they've been taking from you." "How do you know?" "Because David tried to get me to help him access your new bank account. He wanted me to call and pretend to be you, try to get information about your balances." The betrayal cut deep, but I wasn't entirely surprised. "What did you tell him?" "I told him he was crazy if he thought I'd help him steal from my own mother." Janet leaned forward. "When was this?" "Yesterday, after you got back from Harold's office. David was freaking out about the lawyer being here, and Linda was panicking about something she called the inventory." "The inventory? That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Michael sat down heavily, his hands shaking slightly. "Mom, they've been planning this for months. The senior living facility thing? That wasn't a suggestion. It was a plan." My blood ran cold. "What kind of plan?" "They've already contacted places. Linda has brochures hidden in their bedroom. They've been calculating how much they could get for the house if you were gone. Gone. Not dead," Michael said quickly. "Just not here. Not in control of your own affairs," Janet swore under her breath. "They were planning to have her declared incompetent." "That's what it sounded like. David kept talking about getting power of attorney and making decisions for your own good. I thought about Harold's warnings, about how people who were comfortable taking advantage escalated when threatened. Michael, why are you telling me this?" He looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy he'd been before. Addiction and failure hardened him. "Because I love you, Mom. And because I'm tired of being part of a family that treats you like garbage." "But you've been taking advantage, too." "I know, and I hate myself for it. But I never plotted to take away your home or your independence. I just took what was offered and tried not to think about what it was costing you." The distinction mattered somehow. Michael's failures had been passive, selfish, but not actively malicious. David and Linda had been predatory. "There's more," Michael said. "Linda's been copying your important documents. Birth certificate, social security card, financial statements. I saw her making copies at the library last week." Janet's face darkened. "Identity theft preparation. Or preparation for taking control of your affairs," I said, understanding dawning. If they could get me declared incompetent, they'd need those documents to manage my finances. "What are you going to do?" Michael asked. Before I could answer, my phone rang. "David." "Ma, where are you? We need to talk. I'm busy right now." "Ma, this is important. That lawyer of yours has been asking questions around town. People are starting to talk." I looked at Janet and Michael, both of whom were listening intently. "What kind of questions?" "About our living arrangements, about Mom's finances. It's embarrassing, Ma. People are getting the wrong idea." "What idea is that?" "That we're taking advantage of you or something. You need to call him off." The audacity was breathtaking. "I need to call him off?" "Yes. He's causing problems for the whole family." "David, are you stealing from me?" The silence stretched long enough to be an answer. "Ma, that's a terrible thing to ask." "Are you?" "I've borrowed money occasionally." "Without asking, without permission. That's called stealing." "You're my mother. I didn't think I needed permission to take $18,000 from my account over the past year." Another silence, then, "How do you know that number?" "Because I have documentation of every withdrawal, every transfer, every theft." "Ma, I can explain." No, David, you can't explain. There is no explanation that makes stealing from your elderly mother acceptable. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Janet and Michael watched me with a mixture of pride and concern as I finally stood up to my eldest son. We need to sit down as a family and work this out, David said, his voice taking on the manipulative tone I was learning to recognize. This lawyer is filling your head with ideas. Harold isn't filling my head with anything. He's showing me facts, documents, evidence of what you, Linda, and Susan have been doing behind my back. Susan? What does Susan have to do with this? $8,000 on my credit card, David. Did you think I wouldn't find out? The line went quiet for so long, I thought he'd hung up. David? Ma, you have to understand. We've been struggling. Everyone struggles, David. That doesn't give you the right to rob me blind while planning to put me in a home. Who told you about... He caught himself too late. About your plans. About the brochures Linda's been hiding. About the copies of my documents. About the calculations for selling my house. Ma, that's not what it looks like. Then what does it look like, David? Explain to me how systematically stealing from me while planning to have me declared incompetent looks like anything other than elder abuse. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Elder abuse. That's what this was, though I'd never allowed myself to name it before. I'm coming over, David said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. We're going to settle this right now. No, you're not. What do you mean, no? I mean, you're not coming over to my house to intimidate me or manipulate me anymore. If you want to talk, we can do it through lawyers. Lawyers? Ma, I'm your son. Then act like it. I hung up, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. Michael stared at me with something approaching awe. Mom, I've never heard you talk to David like that. I've never had proof before. I've never had support. I looked at Janet gratefully. I've never been angry enough. What happens now? Janet asked. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. With a text from Susan. Mom, David called. We're all coming over. We need to clear the air. Another text from Linda. Martha, there's been a misunderstanding. Let's talk this through like adults. They're mobilizing, I said, showing Janet and Michael the messages. Of course they are, Janet said grimly. Cornered animals always fight hardest. Michael stood up abruptly. I should go back to the house. If they're all converging there, someone needs to protect Grace and Emily. Michael. Mom, I know I haven't been reliable, but I won't let them take their anger out on those girls, and I won't let them pressure you by using the kids as leverage. It was perhaps the most responsible thing I'd heard Michael say in years. Be careful, I said, and call me if anything happens. After Michael left, Janet and I sat in her living room, watching the sun set through her kitchen window. Are you ready for this? She asked. I don't think anyone's ever ready to watch their family implode. Your family imploded a long time. Ego, Martha. You're just finally admitting it. My phone rang again. Harold. Martha, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time, but I wanted to give you a heads up. I have filed a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services regarding the financial abuse documentation we reviewed today. My heart jumped. You did what? It's a precautionary measure. Given the evidence we have, I felt it was necessary to create an official record. This will protect you if your family escalates their behavior or tries to retaliate. Harold, I didn't ask you to... Martha, listen to me. I've been practicing elder law for 25 years. I've seen how these situations develop. Your family members have stolen nearly $40,000 from you over the past 3 years. They've been planning to remove you from your home against your will. This is serious criminal behavior, not a family disagreement. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. $40,000. Years of systematic theft while I cooked their meals, paid their bills, and worried about their well-being. What happens next? APS will likely want to interview you within the next few days. They'll also investigate the living situation, interview other family members, and review the financial evidence. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you stay somewhere safe. I can't abandon Grace and Emily. You're not abandoning them. You're protecting yourself so you can continue to be there for them in the long run. After I hung up, Janet looked at me with concern. What did he say? I told her about the APS complaint, about the $40,000, about Harold's recommendation that I stay away from my house. Good, Janet said firmly. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. Janet, I can't impose. Martha, you took care of me through my divorce, through my mother's death, through every crisis I've had for the past 15 years. Let me take care of you now. As if summoned by the emotional moment, my phone buzzed with another text. This one from Grace. Grandma, Uncle David is really mad. He's yelling at Mom and Aunt Linda. Emily's scared. Where are you? I showed the message to Janet, who immediately grabbed her car keys. We're going to get those girls, she said. Janet, Harold said I should stay away. Harold said you should stay safe. Those children are not safe right now, and they're your priority. She was right. Whatever consequences I might face, I couldn't leave Grace and Emily in the middle of a family crisis. That was partly my fault for finally standing up for myself. We drove to my house in tense silence, arriving to find David's truck, Susan's car, and Linda's sedan, all parked in my driveway, like vehicles at a crime scene. Through the living room window, I could see figures moving around, their gestures animated and angry. Second thoughts? Janet asked. I thought about my mother's china being sold to strangers, about $18,000 stolen from my accounts, about brochures for senior facilities hidden in my own house. No, I said, getting out of the car. No second thoughts. It was time to face the family I'd been enabling and excusing for years. It was time to fight for the life I deserved, even if it meant losing the family I'd been trying so desperately to hold together. The confrontation that had been building for years was about to begin. Janet and I walked through my front door to find my living room transformed into a war room. David stood by the fireplace, his face red with anger. Linda sat on my couch, dabbing at her eyes with tissues in a performance of victimhood I'd seen countless times. Susan paced near the window, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. Michael sat in the corner chair with Grace and Emily flanking, him on the floor, their young faces pale with worry. There she is, David said as I entered. The woman who's trying to destroy her own family. I'm not trying to destroy anything, David. I'm trying to save what's left of my self-respect. Your self-respect? Linda stood up, her tears magically drying. What about our reputation? Do you know what people are saying about us in town? That we're thieves and elder abusers? Aren't you? The simple question hung in the air like a blade. How dare you? Susan said, whirling around from the window. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. Name one thing any of you have done for me that wasn't ultimately for your own benefit. They looked at each other, clearly expecting someone else to answer first. We live here, David said finally. "We keep you company. You live here rent-free while stealing from my bank account. We help with the house. You create messes for me to clean, up while selling my mother's belongings behind my back." Linda flinched at that, confirming Harold's discoveries. "Mom," Grace said quietly from her spot on the floor, "can Emily and I go upstairs?" "No," David said sharply. "You girls need to hear this. You need to understand what your grandmother is doing to this family." "They're children, David," I said, my anger finally breaking through my calm exterior. "Don't you dare use them as weapons in this fight." "I'm not using them as anything. I'm showing them what happens when someone listens to lawyers instead of family." Janet stepped forward for the first time. "Maybe they should see what happens when someone finally stands up to bullies." "This doesn't concern you, Janet," Linda snapped. "It concerns me when my best friend has been systematically robbed by people she trusted." "Robbed?" Susan's voice pitched higher. "That's a strong word. What would you call taking $18,000 without permission?" I asked. David directly. "I call it family helping family. By that logic, I should be able to help myself to your wallet whenever I want." "That's different? How?" David's face cycled through several emotions before settling on rage. "Because you're our mother. It's your job to take care of us." And there it was, the truth I'd been avoiding for years. "I'm 68 years old, David. When exactly does your childhood end?" "This is ridiculous," Susan said. "Mom, you're being manipulated by this lawyer. Can't you see that? He's trying to turn you against your own children." "Harold didn't have to turn me against anyone. You did that yourselves." Michael cleared his throat from his corner. "Maybe the girls should go upstairs now." "No," Grace said, standing up, with surprising firmness. "I want to hear this." "Grace," Susan started. "I want to hear Grandma tell everyone what we already know," Grace continued, her young voice carrying more authority than any of the adults in the room. "That you've all been mean to her for years, and we're tired of watching it." Emily nodded vigorously beside her sister. David's face went white. "What have you girls been saying?" "The truth," Emily said, her voice smaller than Grace's but equally determined. "That Uncle David takes money from Grandma's purse. That Mom uses Grandma's credit card and pretends she forgot. That Aunt Linda sold Grandma's pretty dishes." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda recovered first. "Those children have been listening to adult conversations." "Those children have eyes," I said. "They see what I refused to see for too long." "Ma," David said, his voice taking on the wheedling tone I now recognized as manipulation. "This is getting out of hand. Let's sit down and work this out like a family." "We tried that, David. For years I tried to work things out while you worked me over. You planned to have me declared incompetent. You researched senior facilities. You calculated what you could get for my house if I was gone." David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Linda's been copying my important documents. Susan's been systematically charging her life to my credit card, and you've been stealing cash while I worried about making ends meet." "We weren't stealing," Linda began. "Stop." My voice cut through her protest like a knife. "Just stop lying. I have documentation. I have proof. I have lawyers and investigators and adult protective services involved now." "Adult protective services?" Susan's face went pale. "Mom, what have you done?" "I've protected myself from..." My own family. David stepped toward me, his face dark with anger, but Janet moved between us. "I think you should leave now," Janet said calmly. "This is my mother's house, where you've been living without paying rent while stealing from the owner," Janet replied. "I'd be very careful about claiming rights you don't have." "Girls," I said to Grace and Emily, "go pack some things. You're coming to stay with me at Janet's tonight." "They're not going anywhere," Susan said sharply. "They're my daughters. And they're my granddaughters. I won't leave them in a house full of people angry enough to take their frustration out on children." "We would never," David started. "You've done a lot of things I never thought you'd do, David. I'm not taking any chances." Grace was already moving toward the stairs, Emily following close behind. "Susan," I said, "if you want what's best for your daughters, you won't fight me on this." For a moment, Susan looked like she might argue. Then she seemed to deflate, perhaps finally understanding the full consequences of what had been happening. "One night," she said quietly. "Then we figure this out?" "We'll figure it out when you're ready to be honest about what you've done and what you owe me." Linda stood up abruptly. "I'm not staying here for this. David, let's go." "Where are we going to go?" David asked, and for the first time I heard uncertainty in his voice. "That's not my problem anymore," I said. As Linda and David gathered their things, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief, the weight of carrying their problems, making excuses for their behavior, and sacrificing my own well-being for their comfort was finally lifting from my shoulders. "Ma," David said from the doorway, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Don't do this. Don't break up the family." "I'm not breaking up the family, David. I'm setting boundaries that should have been set years ago. What if we pay you back? With what money? And how does that address the lying, the scheming, the planning? To take away my independence?" He had no answer. After David and Linda left, Susan sat heavily on my couch, looking older than her 45 years. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you," I said. "Are you willing to acknowledge what you've done and work to make it right?" "I never meant for things to go this far." "But they did go this far, Susan. The question is whether you're willing to face that honestly, or whether you're going to keep making excuses." Grace and Emily appeared at the top of the stairs with overnight. "Bags, ready for whatever came next." "I need time to think," Susan said. "That's fine, but you need to think somewhere else tonight." After Susan left, the house felt different, quieter but not empty, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. Michael stood up from his corner chair. "I guess I should go too." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Figure something out." I looked at my youngest son, seeing for the first time in years the man he could still become, instead of the disappointment he'd been. "Michael, you can stay if you want. But there are conditions." "What conditions?" "No drugs, no alcohol. You contribute to the household. Cooking, cleaning, bills. You get a job within 2 weeks, and you start attending meetings. AA. Whatever program will help you get your life together." Michael looked surprised by the offer. "Why?" "Because you're the only one who showed up today, ready to protect. Those girls, instead of protect yourself. That tells me there's still something worth saving in you." "And if I mess up?" "You leave. No second chances, no excuses, no drama." Michael nodded slowly. "I can live with that." The Adult Protective Services investigation had been thorough and damning. David and Linda were facing criminal charges for theft. Susan had avoided charges by agreeing to restitution and completing a financial counseling program. The house felt like mine again. Michael had found a job at a local landscaping company and hadn't missed an AA meeting in 6 weeks. Grace and Emily visited every weekend, and our relationship had grown stronger without the constant tension of family conflict. I'd recovered about half of the stolen money through various legal channels. The items Linda had sold were harder to retrieve, but Harold had managed to recover my mother's china set from a collector who was surprisingly understanding about the situation. Janet and I sat on my back porch on a Saturday morning, watching Grace and Emily play in the garden. I'd finally had time to restore. "Any regrets?" Janet asked. I thought about it seriously. The family gatherings that would never happen again. The grandchildren I saw less frequently. The relationships that had been damaged beyond repair. "No," I said finally. "For the first time in years, I can sleep at night without worrying about what they're taking from me or planning behind my back." "What about the loneliness?" I watched Grace show Emily how to properly water the tomato plants, listened to Michael humming while he repaired the back fence, felt the peace that came with living authentically. "I'm not lonely," I said. "I was lonely when I was surrounded by people who saw me as a resource to be exploited instead of a person to be loved." My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Ma, can we talk? I miss you." I showed it to Janet, who raised an eyebrow. "What will you do?" I deleted the message without responding. "I'll wait until he's ready to talk about making amends instead of making excuses. And if that day never comes, then I'll know I made the right choice." Grace ran over to us, dirt on her hands and joy on her face. "Grandma, look how big the tomatoes are getting." "They're beautiful, sweetheart. Just like you said, they needed good soil and proper care to grow." I smiled, understanding that she wasn't just talking about tomatoes. "Yes," I said, pulling her into a hug that didn't carry the weight of resentment or obligation. "Everything grows better with good soil and proper care." For the first time in years, I was growing too.